lot of fun. We're really excited to have our quarterly chapter meeting here at this location. I hope you guys enjoyed your tour, and you enjoyed the food, enjoyed the drinks, and enjoyed meeting and getting to know one another a little bit more. I'd like to introduce our speaker. This is Matt Kaufman, and he is an appraiser. He works with Spearhead Valuation based out of Bend, Oregon. And I'm very happy to have him join us tonight. He brings a lot of experience, a lot of institutional knowledge, and the arts of equipment appraisal. And this is a little bit different than the real property type of appraisal that most of you do with land billing. He specializes in machinery, equipment, and assets. So we're really excited to have him talk about the approaches to value as they're applied to asset and equipment appraisal. So, Matt, go ahead and get started.
All right. So thank you for inviting me out here tonight. It's a pleasure to be here to talk to you about appraisals. And tonight we're specifically going to focus kind of on the brewery sector. Helps kind of model the process along. Just a quick show of hands. How many are from Moldova County?
And everybody else.
And everybody else. Who's it? Everybody else. Clackamas? Over here?
EOR.
Okay.
Lane.
The river? Anybody from Deschutes County? No? All right. Well, that's where I'm from. But a little larger drive over the hill for somebody. But again, thank you all for coming. A little bit about myself. I am a accredited senior appraiser with the American Society of Appraisers. I got my accreditation in 2013. I started appraising in 2006-07, and I followed in the footsteps of my dad, and I'll talk about that in just a second. But it's been a fun, exciting career to move into. I grew up here in Portland on the other side of the West Hills, went to Sunset High School, graduated from Portland State, and worked for W.G. Moe & Sons, which is a construction company out of Clackamas for a while. Worked for some trucking companies, got kind of some experience with that. I was also in the National Guard for 9 years, spent some time on active duty, and after I got out of the National Guard, I went to work for a company called American Licorice Company, Red Vines. In 2000, they set up the corporate headquarters in all places, Bend, Oregon. And I worked for them for 6 years, got my hands around a lot of machinery and equipment, toured a lot of other factories, Ferrara Pan, Technical Wafers, all sorts of different Canadian places like that. Also got to work with some big boys, Walmart, Sam's Club, Costco. I was on the accounting and finance side with American Licorice Company, so I was relating to those customers, and then I was also relating to Archie Daniels Midland and Cargill Sweeteners as far as helping the electronic transactions between the two companies. So, 2006, I was given the opportunity to leave American Licorice Company. Started my own consulting company, and I'll talk about that in a second. And I was 2 weeks into it, had some clients where I was helping them with their accounting and finance software package implementation. My dad called me up and said, "I need your help on a project." I said, "Okay." And first project was a agricultural and equipment dealership here, located here in Oregon. Done a lot of work for them since, and I've been in appraising basically ever since that started. So tonight we're going to kind of focus this talk around appraising breweries. So let's get started. There we go. So it starts early. Yes, that is me at the ripe age of 6 months, and you get kids to chew on, and you don't put anything in their mouth, right? But that's a good way to start off. Some of you may have come up against this guy. It's my dad. His name is Richard Kaufman. He was the president of the American Society of Appraisers. He has retired to Vancouver, chases my nieces and nephews around up there, and he's the guy that brought me into this. So I stand on the shoulders of giants, if you will. Like I said, he was the president of ASA, went before Congress, talked about USPAP, helped write the machinery and technical specialty books that they teach out of. If any of you taken ASA courses? Anyone? You guys? Okay. You might have even had him teach a course. He did that for me. So, how much do you have? Ponyo Solutions. that's what my company name was when I first started appraising. Well, that was actually what it was when I was doing the accounting and finance. I was doing that fine under that company name for about 2 years. Walked into a client's office and they said, Paniolo Solutions. Hawaiian Cowboy Solutions? Yes. Paniolo is Hawaiian for cowboy, hence the lane around it. I said, okay, we gotta rebrand ourselves and do something a little more professional. Spearhead is my, not homage to the military, but certainly it's a leading direction or force or element, if you go by a definition of that. So Spearhead Valuation Group, we work with business valuation appraisers, real property appraisers, come together and serve our client how we need to. Talk about some projects. This last almost year ago, I was up in Northern Ireland and I was appraising a packaged good company. They make medical packaging for the blister packs that people have when they pull apart the IV tubing. And I happened to be there on July the 12th, which is a national holiday. I don't know what it is, but some of these projects I get, I show up at these places and there's some national holiday going on. July 12th is basically the Northern Ireland Independence Day. They had this structure. It's about 50 feet tall, built in the center of town out of pallets, and at midnight they lit it on fire. The significance of the 12th is when Prince William the Orange fought off the Catholics and maintained Northern Ireland's patronage to England. And so, kind of an exciting time to be there. You never know what's going to happen. Certainly exciting when this lights on fire, people are dancing around it, and it starts to fall over. I can show you a video. This is another project I was doing. This is the ABC Networks up in Alaska. It was based on a loan that needed to be reappraised every 3 years. I got hired to do it. Mine is 35. The day I got off the plane at 5:18 in the morning. I'm in the rental car. Walk outside the airport. It was so cold, my eyelids froze. It basically ripped off all the eyelashes. And you can see the tower on the right-hand side is totally frostbit. Certainly a cold time. Fun. I was supposed to go out on helicopters. It was too cold, windy, snowy to go on helicopters to actually look at the towers that I was supposed to look at. I was in Anchorage and Fairbanks, supposed to go to Juneau. The station manager out of Anchorage was supposed to meet me there. He got there in time. I showed up to the airport to jump on the plane to go to Juneau. It was snowing so hard they couldn't land planes. He didn't get out of there for a week. And I was supposed to only be there 1 day. Didn't end up going. He took some pictures for me and gave me the date I needed to complete it. This is a former sports bar, still a sports bar down in Vegas. A famous hip hop artist thought he wanted to be in a sports bar location. Went into partnership with a casino down there, and you look at these links, which these are the smaller ones right here. The tiles are gold foil. So not only was I doing the equipment, which is all the bar equipment, big screen TVs, they said, how much for this tile? So I had to talk to some professionals and find out what's gold leaf tile go for. And I had to estimate the square footage of all that, and kind of a fun project. On the left, went to Malaysia in September. Same packaged goods manufacturer that I was in Northern Ireland for. Sent me to Malaysia. I took my wife. These are silver leaf monkeys. You go up to this hill and you got bananas there and green beans, and you hold it up like this, like the Statue of Liberty, and these monkeys climb up. And they'll take it, they sit on your shoulder and eat it, as you see here. I was in Louisiana and appraising a plywood plant down there. And I don't know if anybody recognizes that, but a good friend of mine works for Duck Commander, and that's actually from the TV show The Set, where you see the guys in the decoy room where they're making the duck calls. The duck call room is what that is. Last one of a fun place that I went. This is out in Eastern Oregon. They had themed rooms to stay in. I was there one night. It was a divorce, looking at the equipment. Nothing like when you close the door on the back and says, "Hunters, do not clean your game in the room." A little bit about my business in 2015. More than 50% of my business came from insurance. I do work for banks as far as helping them with the financing, do some divorce work, mergers and acquisitions, other, last year a couple of fun projects, appraised McNeil Island Penitentiary. It's no longer a penitentiary. The Washington Department of Corrections had to revert the deed back to the federal government. They had to figure out what it's going to cost to either put it back as a functioning penitentiary or ruin it to the ground so that it could be a nature preserve. This year, so far, it's all, well, 50%, more than 50% is tax, little insurance work, divorce, and banking. Wanted to switch, wanted to change. We're still early. Big projects. Basically, the 2014 was mostly tax as well. I'll get to this in a second, but court projects, tax case. I have a tax case back in Maine on the East Coast. Placement cost of a pulp and paper plant that I'm doing is $2.6 million. We hired a engineering group that actually designs and builds pulp and paper plants to come up with a replacement cost for it to help us figure out what the assessable value is. We're representing the town assessor there. I just got back from Brazil for consumer packaged good facilities, same way that I went to Malaysia and Rhode Island for. Finished an appraisal of some farm equipment for divorce, and I testify in Oregon tax court and divorce court in Maine. So, we're going to talk about the differences between real property and machinery and equipment. Real property, you guys have sales transactions that you can usually go to the county records and find out what they go for. Helpful certainly in houses and businesses as well. But in those businesses, it's not always going to isolate out what the machinery and equipment numbers are. So how do I come up with market values of machinery and equipment? Easiest ones sometimes are eBay. You might find something on there that's a buy it now kind of thing. Craigslist, when we're talking about tractors or trucks, that helps. Ritchie Brothers auctions, that's good for bigger equipment, whether it's farm, ag, or farm ag, it's the same thing. Construction, trucking, any of those. Tractorhouse.com, Truck Trader, those are great, but when you're talking about a brewery and production facilities, a little harder to come by out of those things. The other difficult thing we have is when it's a sale, arm's length transaction. You see in the transactional paperwork, it says conditions other than cash. How do you value somebody that's giving stock for equipment? So we'll go through that as we progress here. How do I do it? I follow USPAP Standard 8. You guys as assessors have to abide by Standard 3, right? For, in theory, if you're supposed to, if the assessor requires you to. But per USPAP, we identify the problem solved. We're going to appraise a brewery. We're going to determine the scope of work. We need to look at all the machinery equipment, all the tanks, all the support equipment, process piping, forklifts, anything else, depending on what the definition is based on whether it's the tax code or banking. Disclose it. Then we go to the client or the subject property and say, do you have a fixed asset record for me? Is there something that's going to tell me the age of when this was installed? Was this purchased a year ago for $1 million and that's all you have, and then you've since invested $500,000? Finally, we get to a pen and paper inventory where we walk around, count how many tables, chairs, 500 barrel, brew kettles, whatever it may be, trucks, tractors, forklifts, on down the line. Come up with a reproduction or replacement cost. Reproduction in the case of the pulp and paper mill. Replacement generally as far as a principle of substitution. I need to replace this chair with another one. What's going to cost me? Picture's worth a million words. When I'm walking around, I'm carrying my camera, my notepad, and if I'm not taking a picture, I'm writing something down. It's a lot easier to go back in your notes if you have a picture of what you've looked at or present it in a courtroom or anything else, present it to your client. This is what it looked like on the day that I was looking at it. Next day later, it had a fire, something like that. Show my work. Usually a lot of math goes into these, so if somebody wants to review it, they want to see how I got to the answer. Lastly, we're going to sign the appraisal. Everybody familiar with USPAT, kind of? Okay. Just in case, this is what you need to do. I won't necessarily go through it, but it talks about everything that we've covered. Pretty much, state the property interest appraised. Usually you're saying I'm going to appraise real property, fee simple, right? Same thing with machinery equipment. We're going to appraise it free and clear. Definition of value, where am I going to get that from? Oregon Department of Revenue, or Oregon revised statutes. That's pretty easy. Effective date. Summarize the scope of work, back to the second or third part of standard 8. Summarize the information analyzed. Show where my numbers come from. State the appropriate class. Are we talking fixed assets? Are we talking about movable personal property, depending on what the local assessor, or however you guys break it down, or need to break it down. Give my rationale, talk about individual pieces of equipment. When I'm talking about 10,000 line items, and 100 of them are chairs, I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about the chairs. I want to talk about the big stuff. I will talk about the chairs, but it's best to show an example of, you got 400 barrel brew kettles out there, or whatever they may have. Talk about how you get that so that somebody can follow your rationale. You might also want to form a chair or two and say, talk about hypothetical conditions or extraordinary assumptions, and if their use, if you need to use them, might affect the assignment results. Lastly, put the certification in, and that's done. Anybody familiar with any other standards outside of USPAT? Any accountants in here? Okay. Any former bankers? No. These are the other standards that are available. When I'm doing bank work, it usually has to fall under FIREA as well. Pretty close to USPAT, but you want to at least recognize that it is also compliant with that. IDS is usually for outside of the United States. Yellow Book, that's for land transactional work. That'll work for ODOT. That'll work for ODOT, TriMet. You can follow along with that. International Financial Reporting Standards and IAS for accountants. If I'm doing a purchase price allocation or something like that, you want to follow along. Jurisdictional exceptions. Some assessors are not required to follow USPAT. Okay? Did I, as an outside appraiser, should I have to follow it? I am finalizing my ARM designation, which is Appraisal Review and Management. That's by the American Society of Appraisers. And what that helps me do is be able to go in and actually review an appraisal in preparation for court. If I have to go head to head with somebody, I want to be able to find out where their holes are and give it to the counsel who has retained me, or the client's counsel, and say, we might want to talk about these or have talking points against the other side if need. It's interesting. It familiarizes you with these standards, knows where to look for them, and then also define where the holes are in some of these appraisal reports, if they are. Out of necessity comes progress. I was starting out doing some work for TriMet for the Milwaukee light rail expansion, and I got done with the appraisal report. I'm all ready to hand it in, and I have my itemized list, like out of Excel, and I give it to the person in charge of TriMet at the time, and he comes back to me and says, "Did I not give you this?" And I said, "No." And in this is a fixture and equipment report photo form. For everything that needed to be a fixture, I had to come up with descriptions. And in here, we can't obviously read it, but it says what it's connected to. If it's removed, will it cause damage to the building or itself? And is it replaceable? I could go through them, but anyway. So I'm sitting on a houseboat of all things thinking, how can I do this? I actually went back to what I did before working with databases and said, I can come up with a report where I input the photo of what I'm supposed to do. It's supposed to have a serial number. This is magnetic here, and I just use it to change the numbers. And it correlates to this, so it tells what each item is. You put the serial number in there, and then you put all that documentation in there, and it changes for each piece of equipment. So from that, I've grown it into a bigger database where I can put market value and continued use, scrap value, salvage value, liquidation value, orderly liquidation value, etc. I can put those in my report. So
that list that you received, did that include purchase price, or did you have to come up with the cost? I was a little confused on that list that was brought up.
the list of what I can put in there.
Yeah, that they sent you last minute.
That did not include, I don't think it had a full replacement cost. It was a replacement cost new. It was a market value, salvage value, and scrap value. So if they had to pull out a bunch of steel, what can they get for it as a scrap on the scrap market, or in the case of air compressor there in the middle, what can we sell it for as salvage value to somebody else? And then what would we have to replace? We pay the owner of the property at a market value to prove the difference. Three approaches to value: Father, Son, Holy Ghost. Everybody familiar with those? Cost, market, income. Cost is usually something to start out with machinery or equipment appraisals. Most things are replaceable somewhere, whether it was an insurance appraisal that somebody might have had, or you need to go to a manufacturer and say, what's a new 400 barrel brute kettle going to cost me, or a bright barrel tank, or a bright beer tank. Market value, is it for sale? I've done a few breweries recently, going out and saying, is there brewery equipment for sale on the market? There is, but it's usually on Craigslist or something like that, where we've gone from a 12 barrel brew system to 20 barrel brew system. So we're getting rid of the old one. And they're usually pretty beat up. So those things are something to have to look for, or talk to equipment dealers, any of those to come up with as far as my market value. Income, pretty hard to tie an income approach to one single chip, right? I've not found a way to do it. I've been lucky enough, I did a lease on a juice box coater. This was in Washington, and the juice box coating machine was within a paper mill, but the paper mill that owned all the other equipment leased the juice box coater to somebody else. So for that one piece of equipment, we could come up with a lease value on that. As I said recently, I'm appraising the paper plant, hired an engineering firm to come up with the full replacement cost, but then on the income approach, we hired a PV appraiser here in Portland and to come up with our income approach, because again, that's a lot of math for an M&E guy to go, okay, we're talking about EBITDA, we're talking about, what was this one? Certainly there's the accounting principles that you got to be aware of. RGAP. Anybody heard of RGAP? RGAP is within publicly traded companies, family-owned companies. It's a way that they kind of balance out their books. It's kind of a little flubber number, if you will, right? There's not a way to readily replicate it. They tried to define it to you. They gave you some workbook that shows some numbers in there, and we don't know what it comes up to. This is how we do it. Okay. So that was a little difficult to come up with. So back to the income approach. How do we attribute it to one piece of equipment? You can look at this facility nets $10 million a year. How can you break that down? Pretty difficult to do. So we fall back to a cost approach or a market approach. We can replacement cost. You can find out, go to Stout Kettles here out on 72nd and say, what's a 200 barrel tank replacement cost of, go to Heister and say, I need a new forklift, what's one of those? And then apply a less depreciation based on life, effective age, any of those. Market value, is it for sale? Again, go to those dealers, etc. Levels of trade, this comes into play with tax issues when people want to talk about it. International accounting standards talks about value in use as the present value of future cash flows expected to be derived from an asset or cash generating unit. Again, that's pretty difficult to tie it to one brew kettle, one share, etc. Value in exchange. Value in exchange isn't even defined in international accounting standards. BusinessDictionary.com. The quantified worth of one good or service expressed in terms of worth of another. And then we fall into levels of trade going down from there, liquidation, salvage values. You show up on some of these job sites and they have some boneyard or something where they have old equipment sitting out there. What's that worth? And to who? Not much. Well, we might rebuild it. It's rebuildable, okay. But where's it going to fall into the taxation scheme? I follow auctions. RichieBrothers.com has a great service. They tell you what stuff sells for. If I go out to a job site of somebody and lo and behold, they purchase a tractor off Ritchie Brothers, you get that serial number, you go into RichieBrothers.com, auctions.com, come up with results, you can find out what that item actually sold for. Pretty handy. Muscle Brothers, I have a family tie there, so it's nice to have those guys help me out. eBay, for better or worse, it's got a couple of things. If you got long enough in the project that you can follow an item and see if it sells, or a group of items, you can come up with a liquidation value that way. No, it's not necessarily a forced or orderly liquidation, but at least it'll help you build some kind of model. The other thing I like on that is a buy it now. Anybody buy on eBay? Few people, okay? Buy it now on eBay, you can go and get it. Whether it's something brand new or something used, somebody wants it, does that define it as a market value? Sorry. Can you defend it? I would. I bought it. You can also do the make an offer. Okay. Can I send it to that person and say, this is what I'm doing. I'm appraising a tractor, Ford 5N, and it's like yours. What is the rock bottom price you would, I can't buy it. It's not within my scope, but something like that. Also follow local auctions of homes and other properties. Go out to farm auctions, those are great because sometimes you get grandma's cedar chest or you get some smoker or something else that somebody's going to contest. And sometimes all you pay somebody to go out and walk behind an auctioneer, take that list and just write down everything that goes for them. Good way to come up with some numbers there. Brokers and manufacturers. We're far away from holidays, but I've been known to talk to people and find out what they like to drink, or whether they like Starbucks, whether they like to go out to eat at favorite restaurants. When I'm calling somebody and I want to get some information out of them, and they don't know who I am or where I'm coming from, being able to offer them just some kind of token, $5 gift card to Starbucks as a thank you. The next time I call that person, they come back and say, you're the guy that sent me that, or you're the guy that dropped off Johnny Walker Black for Christmas. That's the guy across the river. When it comes to breweries, stout tanks and kettles here in Portland, they make just the serial number tag, but a brand new tag saying delivered today or something like that. So put those notes in my field notes to come up with a physical condition to help me estimate some kind of age life, an effective age or true chronological. If I have a builder's plate on there, manufactured in 2002, I now know it's 14 years old. Or if I have to say, did they just put a fresh coat of paint on it? Anybody know what Caterpillar yellow is? That's how you make a Caterpillar tractor more expensive. Get a better price out of it, brand new. market calculated
Can I ask
depreciation.
you a question just quickly about that last slide? It looked like to me, my quick count, that there were like 11 different gradations of conditions
Yeah.
that you got there. So you subjectively rate it when you see it? Okay, but what do you do with that rating? I mean, how do you, just give them numbers instead of, how do you compare a 6 to a 9 and quantify that, for example?
As the appraiser, you're supposed to make the judgment. That's what it comes down to. And as long as you can define it, applying that 9 to very good versus 10 excellent, if that's what you're going to use, be consistent. Put it in there so that they know. Put it in as you line item out each item. Does that make it a 90% good item? Maybe. But when we're going back to an age, that might change it a little bit, and I'll show that in a slide.
So, Matt, so
Yes.
suppose you're looking at an asset that on the surface has a lot of wear and tear on it, but you discovered that there's a significant rebuild, like you replace a motor or a significant component of the inside of the machine. What effect would that have on the condition code that you would place on the asset?
That's where more notes would come into it, because, okay, I could say the outside is fair to average or below. It looks like it was dented by a forklift that ran into it. But the working parts of it, the motor, the parts that are usually more expensive, might be a higher condition code. But to be able to put all that in a report might become a little cumbersome. But however you're going to do it in your notes, to put different line items based on, okay, they gave me a significant record of everything, like a chemical plant with product number IDs. You see those? PNIDs? Somebody's got a list of every little piece of tubing in there, and sometimes they'll say when it was actually installed. So, the tank was originally installed in 2007. It's a caustic type tank. They have to replace it every 10 years, so they're coming up on that. The tubing itself could be a 3-year replaceable asset. Those are things that I would try to incorporate into my report so that anybody that I'm having to present it to can understand.
Okay.
Clear?
Yeah.
Clear, Bud?
What do you do with a piece of equipment like Fred Meyer Bakery has a bread slicer that was made in 1935, I think,
Uh-huh.
but it still works. They can't replace it with a better one today.
There's been rebuilds on it most likely,
Yeah.
right? With some motors, or certainly the blade gets replaced every 60 days, whatever it might be, life cycles. When you're looking at an age life, okay, it's an effective age versus a chronological age. Effectively, it looks like it's 5 years old. They just replaced the motor 10 years ago. It's a good 20-year motor, hypothetically. The blade was replaced last week. You know, I'll show this in a graphic in just a second. It's something they come up with, how you rate different pieces of equipment. Everybody talking about used cars, it loses money right as you pull it off the lot, right? So, we've got a brand new brew system, we just installed it, what's it worth? Well, because it's now used, does it fall into this 20% off of the value, or is it some delineation of that? And can you stagger it? Same thing with a car, is it 15%, is it 10% after it's installed? I mean, we're talking the day after. We have to go to a market value. The difference between a cost new and a market value is usually judged by the difference of the person that's selling it has to reduce the price to entice somebody to buy it. Okay, it's $100,000 new, I'm going to sell it at 90. I have to entice that buyer and give them a discount to buy the almost new one. That's where that comes up. Liquidation value, anybody buy or sell stuff in pawn shops? Generally not, right? All right. Pawn shops I go into because it's great market evidence. Okay, people are selling this particular welder. This welder, however, $250 at Home Depot or Lowe's, and they have that same price on there. Pawn shops work off some percentage, generally 25%. they offer the pawnee, that's probably not right to say that. The person getting rid of the good, I'm going to give you 25% of whatever is new. And anything above that is what I make. That comes down to, this person has to get rid of it, basically. 25%? Is that the lowest number they'll go? What else would they go down to? Market demand, gold, people will pay higher for that. Used DeWalt drills, they're next to nothing. Anybody tried to sell a VHS machine recently? Not likely, right? Salvage value is going to be anything less than that, or even scrap value. Sometimes you actually have to pay people to take things away. Okay? We have done a few appraisals of a few local pulp and paper plants. Cleanup on those things usually will far exceed anything that they may make on the equipment. The equipment now goes to China, usually if they're pulling out paper machines. But anything below that is going to be cleaning up, super fun exercises. Refurbishment and rebuild. Anybody replaced a transmission or motor in a car recently? It happens, right? So, bought a brand new truck for $58,000. Small writing, apologize for that. My son decided to do tranny slams on it where you drop it into gear to spin the tires. Had to replace the transmission for $2,200. We should have to depreciate the truck, but now it has a new transmission. Doesn't make it a new truck anymore. How would we come up with some kind of differential of how to increase that? Just a percentage. We use a weighted method to come up with what the percentage of the installation and the item itself on that is 4%, and you can do the math. So, straight line versus residual. Don't have any accountants in here. Straight line depreciation, this number is straight line. And are we looking at a 5-year life? Are we looking at a 10-year life or something like that? Okay. So on the books, it's fully depreciated. However, it's still working. Still a viable piece of equipment. This, we can change this curve. This is 100% here at the top. We can change this curve based on how long that item's going to last. Is it a 20-year item? Okay, it's 20 years, and then we can rebuild it and we'll get another number out of it. Or, we're talking about that car, as soon as you drop it off the lot, it dips down this much. You can skew that as needy. So, you get out there at 10 years, that planer. Most planers and sawmills are older than I am. Probably older than the older guys in this room. Stetson Ross, they used to be based here in Portland, and they keep getting rebuilt. And they'll run forever because all you have to do is replace the motors. The things are hard steel, replace the motors, replace the blades, and they'll go a long time until you have a fire. Any questions on straight line versus residual depreciation?
Wouldn't you say that depending on the year you're looking at it, the effective age can change? So let's say you're talking to a business owner now and he says, okay, it can last another 10 years. And then you visit that same company again 5 years from now. And they say, well, okay, well, I think it's going to last another 10 years. Right? You know, and it just keeps getting pushed out.
Yeah. Have they done any maintenance to it? Is there regular maintenance that they do?
Maybe, maybe not.
Maybe.
It could just be an opinion.
It's their opinion.
Yeah, and that's
Is it-
valid market evidence.
Yeah, and it's still going. But it's running forever, and you push the life from 10 years to 20 to 25 to get it out that far, and you're talking about small degrees of depreciation when you're out that far. Less than 1%. I mean, if you use some exponents in Excel, you can figure out how to graph this curve and figure out where your asset is.
But then technology may change at some point. Then you go in the next year and they say, well, now there's a newer, fancier machine out there. This
Yeah.
isn't going to last another 2 years.
Okay. So in 2 years, they're going to have to build it. They're going to have to replace it, which would then bring that tail end number. My fancy. That number right there would probably be down to 0 at that point, or again maybe 5%, because it's just about ready to go to scrap or wherever you can justify it with some kind of credible evidence that we know because of regulations or something, whether it needs new electronics. To get new electronics in it, we have to get a permit in here and go from 110 to 220 as far as electricity to get that new piece of equipment in here. So it's going to be down to that bottom, and then you have to replace it. But still, okay, can that item be sent out to China, repurposed, reinstalled? Does it still have some residual value on it?
Well, going along with that scenario, let's say that that asset is now being used somewhere else, and then you go in and value that asset knowing it came from somewhere where they can no longer use it. Would you use the purchase price that they bought it off the market, or would you put more priority onto what you know it's been all the way depreciated down to?
It's going to be a judgment call at that point as far as, okay, we move it to South America where their standards aren't as high as they may be in the U.S. or somewhere else. So he can continue doing some kind of rebuild to it and make it last another 20 years. I mean, you got to make that judgment call when you're there and talking to the client if it's outside the country.
Yeah, with boneyard items, like you were mentioning earlier, would you put more weight on the cost approach or what it could sell for, like at auction price, I guess?
I'd probably be down to a salvage value if it's truly, because somebody's got to put a new motor, a new conveyor. Some of those things can be expensive. They have to reinstall it, new process piping or anything like that, down to that liquidation value, scrap value, and then, okay, to rebuild it, it's going to be 20%.
There's no guarantee that somebody's going to take the week to actually refurbish that item.
Yeah.
So, as it says.
Exactly.
It's salvage value.
Yeah.
How do you account for sudden changes in governmental regulations?
That's going to be a functional or economic obsolescence, where pulp and paper, for example. Not a lot of pulp and paper around the U.S. anymore. Because of the chemicals that are needed to make the paper, the U.S. doesn't want them plugged back into the ground after the mills use them. So you're going to have to put extra economic obsolescence. It's external to the equipment. The extra, like I said, extra economic obsolescence onto it because of regulation, because of chemicals no longer available, materials no longer available, something like that, and just you have to justify it. Where did it come from? What's the premium that they're having to pay for our, when you're talking about refrigeration, R134 that's in everybody's car now versus old Freon, Freon on the black market. Depreciation with rebuilds. Going back to this. Brand new item, 100%. 6 years, it gets rebuilt. It can only rebuild to 80% good. Then it goes back through that life cycle. We were talking about this earlier with tanks, tank form. This is kind of what you did and said, this is the average of where this is. Can I figure out where it is in that life cycle? This is out of Excel. You figure out your number of years at the bottom and put that as a function to some kind of percent. It's going to depreciate 0.97 to that power, and it'll multiply it out and you'll get that kind of curve. Use this quite a bit. And it looks good in the report to say this is where we are in this life cycle. They just did a rebuild versus, and then you can expand or contract those curves as they come down based on where it is. Anybody use cost of capacity? Okay, one. Anybody heard of cost of capacity? 3. This is an effective means if we are appraising a, think about scale. We have a 12-barrel brew system, we're going to a 20-barrel brew system. It's an engineering calculation to say, also known as the 6/10, hence the 0.6 in there, to come up with that number. I'll actually show how it works here in a minute as far as the calculation. It's actually on the U.S. Department of Energy, so it has some kind of clout, and I put this in there that somebody wants to get real finicky about how I come up with something. U.S. Department of Energy is a pretty good reference to put in your report to say this is what it is. We had a boiler in a case study that we used, $10 million, capacity of 100,000 pounds of steam. Another facility, this is using for the prison up at McNeil Island. Had to figure out what the replacement cost of that boiler would be. 34,500 pounds of steam. Use that 6/10, and the cost per building comes out at $5,280,000. You're looking at a third of the production capacity, so it isn't necessarily a third of the replacement cost. And this is the actual equation. Now, if anybody wants to use your calculator to figure out how to do that, it comes up. It's actually $5,280,700, but because of rounding in this one, that's what. Cost of capacity. I also use this based on a model of bridge cranes where I found out a bunch of different bridge cranes that were on the market, and I had to isolate out each piece down to the hoist versus the whole frame mechanism that runs the transit that goes between from end to end, and the hoist itself to say what's the difference in price, because sometimes you'll get a bridge crane that actually has 2 bridges on it. One is a 1/2 ton or a 5 ton or something like that, and the other one might be 20. So you have to say, this is what the structure's worth, this is what the compartmental cost is. And that'll actually graph out as well. But so you come up with an average of what the hoist is, and you can see using that same cost capacity 6/10, you can see the increase, not quite double. We got almost, not quite 3 times between a 5 ton and a 20 ton hoist. Appraising breweries, that's what we're here for. So we talked about the whole methodology. This should all move along pretty quickly. We've accepted an assignment of a brewery. We're going to ask the client for a fixed asset list. They may or may not have one. You've got a list of suppliers that I can use, that I can contact, and then go back to my Johnny Walker and who are my contacts in my Rolodex or phone that I can go back and talk to. You guys are familiar with Marshall and Swift? Yeah, we use that pretty regularly. Okay. In there it actually says complete industrial plants, $118 per barrel of annual capacity. I appraised one up in Spokane that did 12,500 barrels. A replacement cost of that plant should be $1,475,000 out of Marshall. A local brewery in Bend is the next 2 examples. The one in town makes 343,000 barrels annually. Based on that number out of Marshall and Swift, it should be cost $40 million. Okay? They're building a replacement facility in Roanoke, Virginia, to follow the news. The output's going to be 150,000 barrels. Per Marshall and Swift, it comes up with $17,700,000. Anybody follow the news? The budget for that 150,000 barrel plant is actually $85 million. So, Marshall and Swift is good in cases. It's a good guide. I use it a lot as a guide, but you better have some backup homework behind Brewery equipment. Brewery equipment all the way down at the bottom. Age life, 9.5 to 14.5 years for brewery equipment. Has anybody ever been to Bend? Anybody been to Deschutes Brewery downtown on Bond Street? The original one? The 12-barrel brew system. That's been there almost 30 years. Same kettles, same tanks, and Marshall's saying 14 and a half years. You take it into as a grain of salt. It's again a guide. You can talk about going back to the exponential curve of where we were in that cycle, and you can come up with that. People familiar with trending, how to do that, right? Breweries down there at the bottom, I use it. Again, I use it as a guide. Is it the best case scenario? No. In the documentation, it says this is meant to be a guide. It's not the end-all be-all, but it works. Most seems to work for the clients. Brewing system. Low, average, and high. We have $100,000 all the way to $383,000. My example of the Deschutes Brewery that's opening up in Roanoke, Virginia, 150,000 barrels, going to come in at a budgeted number of 85 million. Now, a lot of that's going to include the building and infrastructure as well, but the system, okay, we're talking about 150,000 barrel brew system that's actually going to be 150 barrels, I think is what we're building it out to. But the capacity, the annual capacity is going to be 150,000 barrels. So that's, again, you want to do your homework on those. So we all did the tour. We understand what a mash tun is, lager tun. We're going to dump the grains into the mash tun, mix it with water, it's going to spin around. This is the big brewery in Bend, the Deschutes Brewery. This is a Kaufman system that they recently installed. They're actually putting in another one right now. This is 150,000 or 150 barrel brew system versus a 12 barrel brew system, 20 barrel brew system. So the tank's going to be pretty big. How do they make it? They bring in the grains, right? You're going to store it. The one on the upper left there is about a third of a dump truck load, or about 10 cubic yards. The one on the right is 40 cubic yards. So that would be a huge dump truck to put this into perspective, of grain that they're putting into that silo. The smaller brewery that I did, these are actually called super sacks. They bring it in on a pallet, use those chain hoists to lift them up, and then it drops down into the grist mills. Did they talk about grist mills out there? This is where they grind up the grains, get them fluffed up before they put it into the mash tun with water. This is a 20 barrel mash tun. What they have out there, hundreds? The big one, did they say? Anyone? No. So, 20 barrel brew system. Inside of it, it's pretty small. It's double the size of these tables here, as far as big around. 150 barrel brew system, we're talking it is from that wall to this wall wide. Fermentation vessels, this is where after they get all that around, they put it into these vessels and it ferments, comes up with the equipment. When we're talking size, most of the equipment that I've seen will usually have some kind of capacity on the outside. Right there, this one's 400 barrel capacity. When you're talking about a 150 barrel brew system, they're going to brew it 3 times to fill up that one. This is a bright beer tank. This is where they take all of them together, mix them to come up with some kind of thing. This one's or some kind of mixture of it. 690 barrels. So that's 4 cycles of brewing, which is usually about a 2-day cycle on that, on 150, to come up with enough beer to do that. So it's 8 days to fill that. Well, when you're talking about 343,000 barrels annually, that's where those numbers are at. Brew systems, you're going to have a heat exchanger. This is how they get the kettles up to a temperature. It's going to have some related equipment. I'll show you in a minute. We're going to talk about bottling. This is a small brewery. This one does 8 bottles at a time. They're basically hand-fed into this capping machine. They get filled and the caps get put on. So somebody by hand, somebody on the other end takes them and puts them into the case. Individual labels. Instead of buying your bottles labeled, you have to put them through some kind of labeling device. This one does one at a time. Canning. People still drink beers out of cans. Some people will, oh, it's the original or whatever else. They still do it. Smaller craft barrel breweries will do it because it's a more inexpensive way to do it than actual bottling. Case forming and filling. They're going to make big cases. They're going to come down some kind of chute, as you see on the right. They're going to fill in with the bottles that come up from up above, seals it, gets it off ready to ship. This is a bottling system in Bend. Now, I was talking about a bottling system that makes 8 at a time. This one does 520 a minute. So, you want to talk about scalability, you want to talk about cost and capacity. It gets a little difficult when you're talking about an 8 at a time one versus an automated one. This one washes the bottles, applies the label, fills them with beer, and puts the cap on at 520 a minute. Keg cleaning and filling. This is an individual keg cleaner, one at a time. Somebody's got to go manually set the keg on there, gets rinsed out, and gets filled. It's actually from upside down because all the stuff drains out how they make this work. This is another keg filling system. All they do is stand the kegs on there. It goes through that blue box. It's right there in the middle, and they come out the other end filled. We're down to support equipment. The fine hairs in this, we've got an air compressor. Depending on what kind of brewery we're doing, okay, they make beer, so they're going to have an air compressor probably to manual or to move something from one end to the other. There's going to be filters, there's going to be receivers tied with that. There's going to be a boiler. The boiler is in conjunction with the heat exchanger to get the temperatures of the brew kettles up. That's going to be based on BTUs, pounds of steam per hour, something like that. Filters, filter systems. Some of them are half this size, some of them are as big as those brew kettle or the beer tanks behind. You get little fun things to look at. This is a Zahn & Nagel CO2 measuring device. It tells us how much CO2 is coming out of the beer. That little item right there is $5,000. So, you never know. You don't want to overlook something sometimes when you're doing these. We're talking about breweries where they have a restaurant tied to it. I didn't even present it in here, but you've got all the kitchen equipment, griddles, hoods, dishwashing systems, things like that to take into consideration as well. I appraised a water bottling company once upon a time. They did a review of somebody's appraisal, and my review, I came up with a larger number because they forgot it wasn't kegs, but it was actually those plastic 3-liter or 3-gallon jugs that run around in the trucks. You're talking $1 million worth of inventory, where somebody's trying to get some collateral for a bank. They've missed out on $1 million worth of inventory. You do some kind of age life, they last for 5 years. Do that thing right in the middle. What's the average age of them? What, and where are they? Fortunately, they gave me some numbers. So back in Marshall and Swift, that big number of $340,000 for a brew system, this is actually a quote for a 20-barrel brew system right here on Portland of what I got. Now, and then we talked about 85 million, so we've got to do some homework in here as far as where we're going to come up with these numbers. How are we doing for time? We are there. So, real quick, distilleries. Well, we talked about brewing beer, we might as well talk about distilling alcohol. This is a small 2-barrel distillery, craft distillery. It's a pot kettle on the right. That's where they make the mash. And there's actually distilling levels on the right-hand side. This little brewing system, which is actually inside a brewery, makes 2 barrels a day capacity. They actually made some sangria that smelled delicious. The vodka that I tasted there was delicious. And they've got stuff fermented or processing in wood kegs. It's going to come out as whiskey and bourbon. And this is basically what it takes. It's just a matter of aging it in oak, where you get it into that distilling into bourbons and whiskeys. Obviously, it goes bigger from there. This is a bottle filler for, you can tell which brewery it is now. Unfortunately, I'm good, I asked them. And they said, yeah, show it all. Okay. So this is actually how they fill the bottles. They fill the bottles with the little tubes that looks like, out of a baby bottle almost. Fills it. They pull it by hand, fill it, put a cork on it, take a heat gun, and shrink wrap around the top to get that nice seal. So, on the left, St. James Gate in Dublin, Ireland. Fantastic brewery, if you ever get to go to it. I was there. And then on the right is the Jameson Distillery. Anybody like Jameson's? That's pretty good there. Fun place to go. That was Republic of Ireland, which is at the south. And that was not the trip where they were burning the palace. Anybody know what Ipsy Dixit is? Anybody ever been Because I Said So? Anybody heard that? Mom, Dad tell you that? This is careful as you get on in your age of appraising. Because I said so may no longer work for you. And in the review classes that I took, he himself said it. I said it, therefore that's the answer. We better come up with some math on how to get there. Hopefully I've showed you the math along the way. That's it. Any questions? Any comments? Thank you very much. Appreciate it.